Welcome to the Crossroadz, the show where we provide you the tools to unlock your greatest, creative, purpose-driven life. I'm your host, Kai Vertigo, and I wanted to welcome you guys into a brand new year. 2020 has been absolutely crazy, and 2021 is uncertain. But what I can say is certain is that the Crossroadz direction has not been stronger. This started out as a little project out of school that I wanted to continue learning from people that I thought were killing it and wanted to share their advice with other people who want to kill it in their creative and entrepreneurial fields. And this year, our direction has not been stronger than ever. We have a lot of exciting developments coming up, and I cannot wait to share them with you guys. But until then, stay tuned. And this episode, we are opening it up with one of the greatest instructors of breaking in the world. His name is Jeff Wong, and he is from San Francisco, the Bay, and Hawaii. Jeff Wong, better known in the dance industry as Arc, has spent the better part of a decade in the California Bay Area challenging students to discover and fine-tune their dedication, self-confidence, and ability to creatively interpret challenges to the practice of dance. His aim is to teach dance with an emphasis on fundamental technique, cultural values, and historical significance while providing an accessible outlet for the youth to connect to the thriving hip-hop community that exists on a larger scale. He continues to maintain an active presence in the global breakdance scene as an international competitor, event director, and cultural ambassador. This guy is crazy. He hits all the bases. In this Crossroadz conversation with Arc, he shares his secrets to building a curriculum that unlocks the maximum potential within his students, his life-changing experience teaching in a correctional facility, and the techniques and philosophies he uses to break past his ego and unlock maximum growth both within his students and himself. This episode with Arc was an absolute pleasure to have, and if you are looking into learning instruction or teaching, you will take a lot out of this. And before we start, I just wanted to remind you guys, if you enjoy this episode or any of the prior episodes, don't forget to follow the Crossroadz and join our Discord server. I will leave instructions on how to do that after the episode. But without further ado, please enjoy this episode of the Crossroadz with Jeff Arc Wong. We have Arc in the building. Arc, thank you for joining us, bro.
Yo, thank you for having me, bro.
It's super awesome to finally be able to talk to you. It's been a good minute since we've at least known each other, but I don't think we've ever had the opportunity to sit down and just chat. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I appreciate you for making the time. I want to share with the audience a little story of the first time I guess we met, just so that they kind of have a little bit of background of who you are and what you do. But maybe not the first time, but one of the most memorable moments for sure was, I think it was Style Elements. Was it just 2019 or 2018? And it was the year I came down or up to film, and you entered under Floorgangz, and not only did you kill it because you're a dope Bboy, but also a lot of your students entered from RoCo, and they killed it too. And I remember just how electric the room was. And
was that the one in the gym, or was that the one in
the
Anthony Ross?
It was in the gym. It was in the gym.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the talk of the entire jam, dude, the talk of the entire day, like it was peppered with just people talking about your students. Just like, dude, our kids are killing it. And you were just there by their side. And I remember your presence was very unique in that sense, because you weren't just another breaker who was like holding their own weight. You were there for somebody, and you were there for certain people. And I feel like that's something that a lot of us can look up to. And that's the reason why I wanted to have you on the show. One of the big reasons, man, is because you look out for your people. And whether it's your crew or your students or, you know, just your friends, like you've always been someone who's been humble enough to level and to not put on airs and just be happy and just enjoy yourself, you know, like whether or not. And I know right now is a tough time, like for everybody, for sure. But regardless of all that, like it shows in the stuff that you share and the stuff that you say. And even with speaking with you in the last few minutes before this, it's like you continue to try your best to be a light to people. So I appreciate that, man. Just wanted to introduce you real quick.
Wow, you nailed it. That's so nice of you, bro. I mean, I think like a lot of my whole ethos and being is just in line with the fact that I can't imagine my journey and my life and my path without these people that I've like met through this dance. Because I'm sure like most kids who have gone through college and still break get this feeling too. Like breaking was never the big game plan for life. And at the same time, that's what makes the journey so amazing and serendipitous, is that like so many things come to you, whether it's like friends and relationships, students, crew, family, essentially, through this thing that we never really saw ourselves getting that involved with. And I just feel like I have so much that I need to give back, and that I may never be able to completely give back. Um, and I think that's really been like a huge motivator for me through these years. You know, like mentioning even like Style Elements anniversary, like being there with my crew, being there with Floorgangz, and like being in the competition while at the same time essentially being a tour guide for kids, for like a van of like 20 kids, and some of them even making it past prelims and them freaking out and being like, what are
Yeah.
we gonna do? We're gonna battle gravity. Like,
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. Like, you gotta do your best. That's, that's about it. Yeah.
I forgot about that completely. Yeah, there was a complete call out battle, and I think they met in top 16 or top 8 or something, and they battled
Like after it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like Master Mason.
Yeah.
It was crazy. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you were right there with them too. And
It's hilarious.
on speaking on the serendipitous and like the thing about giving back and being grateful to those who have helped you get to where you are. I do want to ask you a little bit more about, because I haven't really gotten to ask you about it, is your journey from, because you're currently in the Bay. You're currently in Mill Valley, correct? California,
Yeah.
which is close to San Francisco.
Yeah.
You're not from there originally, right? You're from Hawaii. So
Yeah.
I would really love to hear your journey about, we can start briefly on how you learned how to break, or how you got into breaking in general, and what
Yeah.
led you down that path, and what led you down the path to what you're doing right now.
Woo. So I'll try to keep this story as concise as possible. I know
Alright.
that, especially as artists, we tend to like romanticize our own stories, and I definitely am a culprit for doing that.
Dude, everybody
So,
is, don't worry.
yeah. So I started breaking actually at the beginning of my senior year of high school, 2007 or 8. It was shortly after a movie called um, God, Step Up 2 had come out, and You Got
You
Served.
got served.
Yes. And basically, I was into capoeira. I was into capoeira since I was a middle schooler at Kamehameha High School, which is a private school for Native Hawaiians. And enrollment dropped super hardcore in the last years of me being in high school. These dance movies had come out, and essentially a little unit of my classmates that I was cool with, but I wasn't super close with, they took over the capoeira gym space. And I had nowhere else to go. I guess I was always a pretty athletic and hyper kid, but I wasn't an athlete. I tried sports when I was younger, and I didn't ever feel like it was my thing, my cup of tea. And so I was around doing capoeira on my own, and these guys were practicing, sessioning, and battling every day. And I think one of them knew that I could backflip, and he pulled me in. He was like, "Oh, this is a backflip guy. Like, jump into a and I got a response doing a backflip, and I was like, okay, this isn't too bad." And it was, just getting into this dance really kind of willy nilly, I guess, really kind of freewheeling it, and trying out random movements that I had seen, not really just on YouTube, but just seeing my friends do and stuff in movies. And that continued for a while. My older brother Jason, who actually started the open practice spot at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, he had been breaking for a long time. I never had gotten into it too much. It just felt like something that was really distant to me, but I got into it on my own, I guess, through that inception. And from there, it kind of became like the dance kind of became a journey immediately, like a never-ending story kind of journey, because it introduced me to the concept of taking public buses around to the far reaches of the island to these jams, and all the information we had were paper flyers and like MapQuest printed directions. And we would go to these jams that would last super long. And Hawaii's scene in the late 2000s was huge. It had exploded. It was around the time circus runaways were really big.
Gotcha.
This is pre Lil Demon. I mean, Lil Demon started around the same time that I did. I remember actually we entered our first jams like at the same jam. I remember seeing it was
Oh.
like 4 or 5. And yeah, anyway, these jams that happened in Hawaii, in hindsight, were incredible because they had the whole community, like not just breakers, but like, and not just hip hop heads, but just everyday people, like attendance beyond like 100 at these conference halls. And there was always emceeing, there was always a black book battle and like graph pieces happening. Of course, there was breaking, and they always had like a diverse number of DJs who would play. Honestly, again, in hindsight, it's so trippy to me. Like DJs that wouldn't just play break beats. I remember there would be like Earth, Wind, and Fire, and even like Michael Jackson
Wow.
songs being played at jams for ciphers or even in battles.
Wow.
It felt
Sounds fun.
like, yeah, like a graduation party to some degree, like every time. And that really hooked me, I think, because as a young person, I, like many other people, like I kind of struggled with finding an identity and um, connecting with other people. So I started in high school, and I started going around to jams and having my own little adventure, and practicing on my own in my neighborhood on like pieces of cardboard in the grass was kind of like the only alternative outside of school for me to like develop my skills. And I ran into a kid named Jared, who's still in the crew. And I ran into a kid at a park who was like, "Oh, you breakdance? Like, we have a MySpace call out battle happening down the road." This guy didn't go to my school. He was a neighbor, and he invited me to come to this practice that was happening at a community center nearby. And I didn't really know that many other people that braked, especially people in my neighborhood. And I went the next day, and I saw a couple of kids that I had known from like rival private schools that had smoked us um, at my private school dances, and a bunch of other random kids. And we just battled for like 4 or 5 hours. And like people I'd never met in my entire life, we just kind of became friends and family overnight. It was a big
Wow.
group of kids from Townside. I'm from Kaneohe, which is, I guess, kind of on the windward. I wouldn't say countryside, but it's a little, it's not even suburban. It's somewhere between suburban and rural, I guess.
Okay.
But anyway, like we met up and we all chilled and hit it off. And it turned out that like a week later, when we went to the University of Hawaii practice spot, all of the same kids were there. And we were all connected to one guy. His name was Bboy Solid Jin. And he was like second generation 808 Breakers. 808 Breakers started in 2005 from but mostly led by a guy named Justice from LA Breakers. He also founded House of Reps. And this guy Solid at the time was like one of the few members in Hawaii left. And he was connected to all of us. And again, serendipity is the word. Like he liked all of us and he put all of us into the crew. We were beginners. We were kids who had been dancing for like a year, 2 years tops at the end of high school. We were all around the same age too. And he brought us into this crew, and he actually had a ton of opportunities commercially. So, you know, here I am in my first year, like a noob, just breaking and really just enjoying it. But we got sponsored by a local television like show.
Wow.
We were music videos, and we got hooked up with the Dare program locally.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so we did, honestly, we have a record of it. We did like somewhere like 120 performances in the first 2.5 years
Wow.
of being a crew, of being kids. And we're like getting on microphones talking about like not smoking cigarettes and performing and doing routines. And I remember definitely feeling a high level of imposter syndrome then. And I'll come back to this to now, but I remember definitely feeling like unworthy of all this because, you know, we were here on this island with this thriving scene at the time, you know, like 808, like Hawaii Rocksteady chapters with Skilroy there, and all kinds of dudes who were just insane at upper echelons of skill beyond us. And here we were getting kind of like the limelight as just kids. And I know now that is a separate skill to perform and to share with audiences. But yeah, we were getting smoked at jams left and right. It was nuts to the as prelims. And I'm so happy that the story unfolded that way because those L's, I guess, were the biggest wins in our development as a crew and as a family, because the focus was not on how well we could like stick it to somebody else or win. Of course we practiced a lot, but the focus was like how can we gratefully or graciously lose and enjoy our experience no matter what the cost at the jam, whether it's like in the ciphers or like I don't know, drinking soda in the parking lot, or playing around wrestling in the corner of the room and like pushing each other around, like those kind of like micro moments
Right.
was always the focus, because like yeah, because we kind of realized that there was like this bigger plate of experience already offered to us, more so than just like how well we're going to perform competitively. So so yeah, we got put down in this crew. I got into University of Hawaii at Manoa. uh, Layton, one of our other crew members, went to college somewhere else. And I don't know how deep I want to get into it, but like the next 4 years, like my college career, as much as I was like focused on college and trying to get into grad school for physical therapy, and I was a kinesiology major, dude, I was like 120% into breaking. It was like air, it was something that like I didn't even consciously meditate on or set goals on. It was just something that I loved, and it connected me with not just my crew, but like peers and people who would become my crew members. So at the University of Hawaii, we met Jordan Roll. Do you remember IGSNP?
Yes.
Yes. So we met Jordan from IGSNP there at a
okay.
freshman welcome dance.
Wow.
And we just all got along. We're goofy dudes. We met Eddie Shellman Shells. He's not in our crew, but he was in Rep Styles for a minute. He's in the East Coast. And we met Tyler Funky T, like prominent members of our crew. Like Hijack got into our crew at around that time when we were in college and he was in high school. He lived down the road from our dorm.
Oh, wow.
Like there's a lot of like miniature stories, but essentially like a huge part of our crew, just like in our relationships, evolved during that college period, because we were still continuing to perform. We went through iterations and drama like many crews do, people coming in and out. And we stuck to our guns, enjoying the dance foremost, but also like sharing it. And so we actually had a bank account. We committed ourselves into an LLC in Hawaii. Yeah, there's still an 808 Breakers LLC. And we saved up money from all of our like little shows, from graduation parties to like bigger theater shows. We worked with like the Korean Chamber of Commerce or industry too. And
crazy.
Yeah, we made a bunch of money and we flew out to like Evolution. The last Evolution that happened in New York, we flew out to Massive Monkeys Day in like 2010 and Freestyle Session, the one that Jinjo battled Renegades in the finals. And we kind of like catapulted ourselves into the bigger breaking scene just because we loved it, not to get clout in any way, because we were still like scraping by prelims at local jams. And we were just enjoying that journey. We were enjoying that for whatever it was, and being able to go on an airplane ride without any parental supervision with your friends and like just go crazy in the
Dude,
city.
that's amazing.
So that painted a huge part of the picture, and like feeling that I have for being a b-boy that would later come into play with how I teach. And so I finished college. I got my bachelor's in kinesiology, and I, for whatever reason, maybe it was pressure, maybe it was self-imposed pressure, I set my sights on graduate school for a doctorate physical therapy program here in Oakland, Samuel Merritt. Made it into the waiting list. I came out here and I was immediately just breaking all the time. And I jumped out of that. I found a full-time job selling printer ink and toner. I was an account executive.
So this was was this the catalyst that brought you to the Bay? Was trying to apply for grad school?
Yes. Grad school / in the back of my mind, like, yo, they have a breaking scene. other headhunters is there, rock force is there. Like, and I have my grandmother lives out here too. So yeah, it was like, okay, that lines up. Like I think I spent enough time at home. It's not too far away from Hawaii. Also, like some of our crew members are actually one of them. He's a SFFD fireman here now. He's
Oh.
from here actually. So it was like I had friends here, and the sales job was a blessing because it really pushed me out of my comfort zone and forced me to be extroverted in a lot of ways. And it was rough because I was selling a product that I was not that passionate about, recycled ink and toner, in a dying industry in San Francisco, in the Bay Area. But it definitely like got me out here as far as like just navigating the geography, just being comfortable with like driving within the city, outside of the city, all those things. Anyway, I got fired. And that was an experience. I was stressed out of my mind.
You touch on both during the sales thing and also just coming up and breaking. That I think is super rare for kids like your age back then to have been cognizant of, which is like, well, seeing the upside of things, right? Like being able to take your sales job, right, and be like, okay, well, in hindsight, yeah, I learned all these things. Probably didn't enjoy it the most, but it's really from, like you said, those losses, those L's you took. Yeah, that's where we grow the most. That's where it comes in. I think that's a huge part of breaking, why it's so valuable, is because they don't hand you an 8th place medal if you suck. You don't make it past prelims. Well, if you don't make it past prelims, you don't make it past prelims, whether if you suck or not. And it's just like, it's a very humbling experience. And those L's, like a lot of people can take those and just be frustrated about it and let it take them to a very negative and just like rabbit hole place of just like, like frustration and blaming everything for things not going their way. But the mentality that you guys adopted as a crew, which I am really curious about, is just the idea of enjoying everything, even the little things, like even just enjoying being outside and making the most of that. That moment. That's really beautiful. And we see it in your dance. Like I remember a lot of people mention this when they see 808 breakers break or dance or battle, is that you guys are just having a good time. It's a very, very different vibe. And I think it's something that a lot of us can learn from if we're just trying to, use breaking to improve our lives, as opposed to use it as like, just a way to front, which is fine. That's a part of the dance. But yeah, I really admire that about you guys. So
Thanks,
yeah,
man.
we just want to throw that out there.
There's just so many reasons why people can choose to do this, and your why can shift and evolve over time. I think as a crew, we're lucky to have been anchored from the get-go into the why of like doing this dance just to enjoy ourselves in an uncomfortable environment with each other. And maybe it's just a freak accident of chemistry and personalities that we have connected within our crew that allows us to like relax into those moments, and likewise be just entirely surprised at the results. Because again, like it was never like we're used to being bad. I don't like, and I to say that like in a negative way, but like our level of expectation for ourselves pretty low, which is an incredible, like liberating mode to operate from.
Right.
And also like balance and temper with pessimism, though, as opposed to pessimism being like, oh, we're gonna be trash. Like not necessarily that either, but just like we've seen ourselves do ridiculous flops and facepalm worthy moments, and we're like, well, let's see if we can find a lower bar or not. And let's anyway. Yeah,
I mean, it's really fascinating to hear, just because of your guys' balance between that low expectation, but you guys are still like good enough to pass prelims when you travel like a good amount of time, right? So it's like, I think there's a really interesting balance and almost like paradoxical there, right? Where like, okay, like we don't take ourselves seriously, but because of that, we are able to perform at levels and at mindsets that most people who are under pressure and are taking this very seriously
Yeah.
cannot. So I just
Yeah.
want to touch on that. And yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty
I
incredible,
mean,
man.
I think that's, going back in, I guess, into stories like that is a translatable energy. I don't even know if it's like you could call it a skill, maybe because maybe a part of it is environmental as well, but it's a translatable vibe, I guess, to the rest of your life, you know, like getting fired for the first time from a full-time job that I thought was my rock so that I could break on the side as much as I wanted was pretty rough. And what started off as like, okay, I need to find odd jobs just to like keep going became a full-time career. So upon leaving that job, I was breaking even more probably. I ran into Milestone from Renegade Rockers, who was holding it down in the Bay Area as far as teaching. He was teaching like all over the place. He was teaching from San Jose all the way up to Marin and Mill Valley. He had started the program here at RoCo,
Mm.
and Kid David was one of his first students.
Oh,
At
wow.
that time, he had already been teaching for 15-ish years, I think, since he
Wow.
was about 15 years old. Um, yeah, Kid David and Danny Dibble and a couple of other guys, regulators crew, came from the same studio. And he saw me around and he invited me to both sub some of his classes because he was getting invited to jams outside of the country. And I think at that point, he was already kind of like looking onwards in terms of his own career. And I just worked well with his students basically. And I had seen some of his students already. They were practicing with me. And, you know, Renegade Rockers was an amazing force and crew and family that was different from 808 Breakers in that like they liked to keep things within their bubble of of friendships and crew. And yeah, he got me hired at Acro Sports. He got me hooked up into teaching at after school programs and outreach youth services. We worked at a youth prison. We worked with
Mm.
Stockton youth authorities for a short amount of time. We taught breaking there for incarcerated dudes. And
How was that experience?
terrifying, but incredibly fulfilling because you, I guess, being exposed to harsh realities that other people have to live, especially like I'm a kid from Hawaii, and don't get me wrong, like there is gang presence, but it's just like a different kind of gang presence. Like we were working with kids. I'm saying kids, like these guys were like, 16 to 20 years old. Were like Norteño, Sereno, like the Cholo gangs and people who had done all kinds of stuff and that felt really guilty for doing some pretty atrocious crimes. And they were just trying to find like the guys that we worked with like closely were trying to find a way to kind of like redeem themselves and
Mm.
translate their energy because it was a youth detention facility. They were foreseeably going to be released even if they had committed things like murder and stuff like that. So we had set ourselves up to like connect these guys to the breaking scene in wherever they go back to. And that was like really fulfilling. And there was like a lot of pretty deep conversations that happened around that experience, as far as like one guy who got pretty good. He was getting like flares, windmills, and turtles, and we would see him like once a month. He would always
Damn.
have like some new power move to show us, and he was like celebrated at at the prison
Wow.
for being able to fly basically. And he was, I remember one of the conversations was like he had killed somebody, and he was really worried that he would be kind of looked at differently, or if like stories would get out in the breaking scene. And I don't remember the exact things that like words that we used to express it, but we told him that essentially like your life and the people that you surround yourself with are in your control, number
Mm.
one. And breaking and hip hop is no different. That this is a big ecosystem of people, um, of every kind of spectrum you can imagine. And even within the breaking scene, like you get to choose who you share yourself with and connect with. And that's up to you. Like, but your art form, your breaking, your skills that you develop are things that you could just carry along with you wherever you go, whether or not you choose to engage in a bigger body and community of people. Like, like in a sense that you can separate the art from the art community if you choose to, or and you could be selective of like which of whom within the art community you choose to share your art with. You're in
Yes.
control of that. And yeah, I hope that that guy's still breaking. We haven't really been in touch, but there are definitely some amazing stories, and experiences, I guess, like just going through the process of going into a youth prison and teaching a dance, especially a machismo dance like breaking, and how that kind of relates to the energy, I guess, because I've never myself been to like been an inmate, I guess, at a prison. So I can't act like I know what that's like. But I do know the energy that I felt, and that it was kind of like at first breaking was like just like a silly, gimmicky, mimi dance. And upon sharing it in a way that's like, no, this is a discipline, it's hard as hell. And you do have to like use your testosterone in a sense, like you have to acknowledge this male energy that you have here in this dance and like channel it into something that really isn't fighting. And I don't mean to sip on the Kool-Aid necessarily that everyone buys into, that like, oh, dancing is an alternative to fighting. But I think that there's an energy in this dance form, even if you're not battling and you're just practicing it on your own and face planting in concrete. There's an element of this dance, this an energy of this dance that like kind of goes into your that forces you into your warrior stance.
For real. Yeah.
That's like absolutely necessary for you to understand in yourself to navigate life, how to be a warrior, I guess, you know,
100%.
put in work and take flack. So anyway, I'm sorry. So
Yeah.
going back to my story, this is a
It's all
long
right.
story.
No,
I'm
that's all
sorry.
right. That's all
So,
right. Thanks for sharing that. It's very
um,
important. Yeah.
Milestone moved on to pursue a career in fashion in LA, and he bequeathed his entire portfolio of work to myself and Natron. I'm
Mm.
sure you were
Oh,
aware
Natron.
of. Mhm. Google had like a breaking class that Stance did like a little thing on. Yeah,
Yes.
that Miles started that. Milestone was the guy there.
Oh, okay.
I'm so
Wow.
jealous he gave
That's
that.
crazy.
But no,
I'm re-
it's really good.
I'm really curious how that, yeah, but yeah. Okay, so
That's
continue.
that's the story for Miles. Like I don't know exactly. He was like a really charming, handsome dude who like made breaking look and hip hop just cool, I think. And he was definitely a people's person. And I'm not surprised that he managed to get programming into all these places. But anyway, yeah, I went through a divorce when I was out here
Oh,
going through.
really? Yeah.
Yeah, like getting married out here was, I guess, another factor in like
Mm,
moving from Hawaii to the Bay. And so I went through a pretty rough patch, and I had all this work, all this youth work in breaking that I never had planned for. It was never part of like my career or like life's dream to teach breaking or just break, for a living in any on any scale. And it it was not just that it was too much. It was just strange for me to like be able to wield a career in art. Um, but in hindsight, it lined up perfectly with all the things that we did in Hawaii that I'd never planned for either, in terms of like speaking in front of large audiences and performing. Like those are all skills that you need
yeah.
to be a strong teacher. And so I invited Hijack, who's like a little brother to me and a best friend, up to the Bay to live with me. And eventually Karma from Maui, who was a new member of our crew at the time that it happened. and we all lived in a tiny 1-bedroom studio. And we played out the romantic idea of being in a crew in a big city and just breaking all the time. We shared the work. Um, we shared lesson plans and strategies with how to teach together. We practiced together. We lived 2 doors away from Profo, literally two
Mm.
doors away. Um, and we developed youth programming in our little huddle in the Bay Area. And it was really great because we kind of broke off studio work and program work within ourselves so that we could focus on one program at a time. So I I was allowed to basically share the work with these guys and put all of my energy as an experiment into this one studio up here in Marin, RoCo Dance,
Mm.
that had
Yep.
2 locations in Fairfax and Mill Valley. And I guess a big part of everything that I've done as a dance teacher has been fueled by curiosity and this element of thinking that it's all going to come to an end and that it's built on sticks. And
Uh,
that it's not real life. And I don't, again, like I know how that sounds so negative, but at the same time, um, it allowed me to take a lot of risks that in hindsight were amazing experiences that not many other people have done. For example, essentially creating practice spaces out here, and creating a small microcosm of breaking within a bigger bubble of breaking. So, like, we have youth jams, we have practices for the kids out here,
mhm.
we have like youth workshops and summer camps, and even like within the programs, we have battles, and we engaged other dance programs, other breaking programs within the Bay Area and abroad. Uh, I drove these kids to dang near every single local jam that happened in 100-mile radius. Um,
Crazy. Or driving the
we
school bus too.
essentially, yeah, like I did all that because I was like, I wonder if I could do that. Like, I guess a big part of the ethos was everything that I've experienced as a b-boy, all of the experience, like crazy serendipitous experiences as a b-boy that I've experienced, both performing and battling. How can I give a guided version of that to kids? How can I package that? How can I organize that and be just a guide, yeah, through that experience for a
Mm.
pocket of students? And so, with these kids at RoCo, at least like our I don't want to call them a competition, but like our little crew of them,
Yeah.
like we flew them out to Massive Monkeys Day. I want to say 2017. We've gone to two. We
Crazy.
got like an Airbnb. Everybody stays together. We cook together. We do life skills.
I
We
see that. Yeah.
and then I just worked my way into speaking in with the Massive Monkeys guys and creating a staged exhibition battle between their students and my students.
Oh wow.
That happened before they had a youth bracket at Massive Monkeys Day in 2018.
Mm.
Like that was I'd like to think that was the genesis of them putting their students on stage at their own jam. And yeah, we had like a massive like 20-minute battle. And there's some stories there, I guess, that are for the kids themselves. Um,
That's phenomenal, man.
but
Just, I mean, I
we
want to touch on
took
it
that
real quick
and went
before.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to touch on it real quick. What you've been sharing about the kids, because I've been seeing that on your Instagram stories, and if people follow you and like RoCo Dance, then they'll see that when you guys go to these big events, you guys are not only going to the event and throwing down, but you really are a unit. You're doing things together. You're cooking, you're exploring, you're taking them places, and just the idea of the guide thing and you taking initiative, like you said, to take the risks and
Yeah.
try this a different way. Like how can we make this experience better for people learning breaking is super, super valuable, breaking wise, but also to any educator. It's like, I really want to commend you for the effort you put into it and for the things you did, because it's pretty phenomenal, man. Like, from looking from the outside in, what you're doing for these kids, like you're making their lives, you're giving them times of their lives, like just being able to, at a young age, in age as young as theirs, like be able to tour like the nation and to compete and to show up and actually like, you say it's a microcosm within the breaking scene, but because you are putting pressure in this one space and being able to like experiment and then give them this experience, it shows in their movement and
Mhm.
in the way they carry themselves. So yeah, it's pretty phenomenal, man. I think that's super amazing. And I hope we get to talk to you more about it in the future, but I don't want to hold up too much on this, and we'll touch back on it, but I want to let you continue your story as well.
Yeah, I mean, like that. I think I've always wanted to make sure that I had a good balance of inorganically producing experiences for these kids and at the same time allowing them to like interpret the experience themselves, because I also realize how lucky I am to have a crew and a family in the way that I do. And it's taken me time and perspective to like see that, that like not every crew is like 808 Breakers. Not every crew is like kids that grew up together basically and supported each other through like crazy times, good and bad, and traveled and just enjoyed one singular thing through that whole time, which is breaking. And like sharing essentially it's like trying to share the 808 Breakers experience. I understand
Hmm.
by the act of even sharing it is kind of like an inorganic concept, but it's been beautiful to see that kind of like mold with the variables of like these kids themselves, because these kids aren't from Hawaii. um, they all do live in the same neighborhood, which is awesome.
It is.
But they weren't necessarily all good friends at the beginning or even like now. Like,
Well, it's like,
and,
it's like the same way a basketball team or a high school, like, like a high school sports team would get together. Like you could say it's inorganic because they didn't organically become friends, but they all united under a single interest. And I would still say that that merits a
and
lot of organizations.
I mean, I was in orchestra. Were you in like band or orchestra when you were coming up?
That's funny as hell.
Situations.
Yeah, for 2 years I was a trombone player in middle school.
Oh,
Yes, sir. So
I mean,
yeah.
when I really think about even my own expectations, and like direction of all these things that I've like tried to put together for these kids, I try to keep in mind and be humbled by my own experience in orchestra and how I don't continue to play violin. And I have no intention in being in a professional orchestra by any metric, but I have these memories and experiences of camps and trips and friendships and ridiculous things that don't even have anything to do with orchestra actually, like that have helped me formulate my identity. And I hold those memories like really close to my heart. And that like as far as breaking and these kids, like whether or not they choose to continue to break for their whole lives, whether they become prominent in the breaking scene or not, whether they're game changers or not, whether they get to a high level. And I mean, that's like a weird concept, even as it is, but whether they get here or there, like that, these experiences are going to be things that they cherish and hopefully use to develop like real life skills that just have help them live good lives. Um,
Hmm.
I've,
Yeah.
I've had a lot of conversations with other breaking instructors in the last couple of years because now teaching breaking is becoming an industry. I'm sure you see it. Everybody and everywhere. It's not just the Olympics. It's been coming, but like, formalized breaking instruction is now becoming a thing, like a real thing. I've talked to a lot of instructors about the idea of like, what are you going for? What is your version of success?
Hmm.
What is it in your students that you want? I've heard things that they're not wrong, like things as far as like, like I want kids. There's some people that believe success in students is just breaking forever, period. Like just breaking for a long period of time. That's cool. Longevity, cool. I've heard, other instructors say that like they want their kids or their students to give back, to be able to like change breaking. That's pretty ambitious, but like, yeah, that's success too. Um, I've heard people talk about like, having their students just become great teachers themselves and give back in that sense, like that's huge too. That's another lane. And there's so many other like forms. I think that in general, like hip hop as a culture is like built into its DNA, like this competitive spirit. And that's how we keep our knives sharp. That's how we keep our skills sharp. We test each other. And at the same time, we also confuse that competitive spirit with like this attitude that everything that happens under the hip hop umbrella, or breaking especially, is zero sum. Like I won, so you lost. And that I think subconsciously we're kind of fooled into thinking that there's only one version of success and one version of winning, one version. It kind of, it's funny because it kind of goes into this thing that you were mentioning before, like when you go into a jam, if you lose, you lose. There's no eighth place trophy. But at the same time, like you have to create your own version of winning internally
Exactly.
from that yourself. But again, like now that we're seeing like teaching, more formalized teaching, and we're seeing more formalized competitions and even like judging systems kind of sprout, that I guess there's a lot more transparency now into people's motives and directions and ethos in how they choose to share this dance, for better or for worse. Because yeah, it's a big table and everybody can eat and have it different ways. But I think I hope, I pray for more empathy and understanding, for people to see eye to eye and respect each other's ideas of success within their students, because a lot of self-identity and ego and insecurity also can be shed onto your students, in the same ways that all these great things can be shed onto them as well, and great qualities and morals and values. And
Right.
I just hope that like as a community we can juggle those things and not say that, in 10 years, that the gold standard for teaching students right is that, your kids make it past prelims all the time, or that they all have head spins, or that they all have cool style and they wear like all Nike fits, or that maybe
Yeah.
all of them can also rap and DJ too. Like those are all dope things, and they're all different things.
Yeah.
they're all different things, and we kind of need that the full spectrum. Um,
Yeah, I want to touch on that if that's okay.
yeah.
Because I remember in your mission statement for, if I read it correctly on LinkedIn or whatever, and talking to you now, when you mention breaking or teaching breaking, it's not about, it's not all about learning breaking. It's like far from that, and it's far from that. And it's like you said, um, when you have a kid join orchestra or join football or whatever skill they decide to take, like some coaches may be like, yeah, like the goal is for you to play football forever, and like even if that's not your plan, like maybe that's the idea, that's the ideal um like end goal or outcome that the instructor is holding for their kids. I mean, okay, like sure. But I think something that is always going to be valuable that you can bring to anybody. Um, and this surpasses medium. This is more of just like
Yep.
the art of teaching,
Yep.
or the art of being an instructor or a guide, right? Is like, how are you bringing out the best in your kid,
Yeah.
regardless of where they want to go? And I think that's something that I'm glad to hear you are considering all the time, and it shows in your instruction, and it's beautiful because even though your goal isn't to make these kids break forever, and like you don't hold them to that standard, it shows in the way that they embrace like the time they have, because I don't know what it's like behind the scenes. Like I can't pretend to know what it's like with your kids all the other times, but when they're there, when they're in the room with everybody else who
Mhm.
breaks, like you can tell they're having a good time. And
Yeah.
not only are they having a good time, like they're killing it, like you can see they put in time and dedication and work, and that they listen to your instruction because it's working for them, and you see that on their story, you see it on the stories, you see that
Mm.
in person. So I want to commend you for your method and your intention for teaching, because I think that's super admirable. And yeah, I think a lot of people should continue to push themselves, including myself as a guide, as an instructor, because it's hard for us to remember just how much it matters when we're like the impact we're having and what our intentions, our outcomes can mean to everybody else. So
Yeah.
yeah, man, I
Like
really
you said,
appreciate
it goes beyond the medium, man. Like
it. Does.
it's
Yes.
beautiful to see people come to life. And I mean, like even yourself, like doing a podcast and like digging into questions along the spectrum of like deep and shallow, like you get to see people come to life in the way that they share themselves and express themselves. And I think that as that kind of thing is so hard to put a dollar amount to. It's hard to commodify, and at the same time it is like the most amazing and valuable thing to see and to be around or to elicit from someone. And it goes beyond like any metric or like goal as far as like, you know, tournament standings or even like ratings online. And it's something that I feel like maybe come doesn't come to you like unless you've done that thing for a while, maybe like to understand like the beauty in that journey. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. As far as teaching, basically that's it.
I
That's the
feel you.
story.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, we reached it.
That's
We
how I
made
got
it.
there.
Thanks. Yeah, and
Um,
I no, thank you for taking us through that and taking the time, because it puts into perspective um where you're coming from. Not, the road is not a linear straight pathway. Things
yes.
can fall in your lap sometimes. And speaking on the topic of things falling in your lap and moving on and pursuing this road, which is not so linear as we might imagine. We talked earlier, and that you have future plans. So even if they're not 100% engraved, I do want to hear about where you're at now, how COVID, of course, like it's not been easy, and all this stuff has been treating you, and what are plans for the future? Because you may or may not be staying in the Bay.
Yeah. So yeah, first the situation, I guess, as it is, and hopefully we are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. But as far as COVID and the Bay Area, California, and their pretty strict lockdown policies over the last year, the studio and group of I guess I'll say the studio and dance program that I run as far as breaking is concerned, it's been hit pretty hard. And I know that everybody else is also challenged with juggling these restrictions and rules and reformatting themselves. We've gone from Zoom classes to outdoor parking lot classes with wildfire smoke and 40-degree weather and rain in masks, to really just to nothing, to basically that. Like the students have been absolute warriors dealing with the number of environmental kind of like factors in being a dance student in any of our programs here at RoCo Dance, and I commend them hugely. We had an outdoor showcase a couple of months ago for the winter. Normally we're RoCo is primarily a stage like theater dance institution, and every semester we put on these really big, nearly like professional level theater shows
Wow.
at the County Civic Center Theater. And it is a far cry from jams and battles and things like that. And so we had to reformat that into a humble parking lot situation. We understandably have had hugely reduced numbers and enrollment, because where we live, especially here, a lot of these kids, like their parents are pretty old and at risk, or they live with their grandparents. And so there's that. And quite simply, I think if you already have been taking breaking classes in person, it's very hard to transition into Zoom. I think that as a b-boy or b-girl who already has been doing breaking, the concept of Zoom classes is actually a lot easier and like digestible than
Sure.
if you're a teenager who also is trying to navigate through 7 hours of schooling through your normal day to like jump on Zoom and be expected to like break in your living room in your socks with mom over there screaming at you to not
Yeah,
hurt your neck.
that's
And
also
like,
true.
and, and so, you know, it's been pretty challenging, I guess, as far as like teaching and sharing breaking and creating an experience for the kids that feels good online, and likewise like even in person. But we definitely are still moving along, and i I realized that for myself, my whole philosophy on teaching breaking has definitely been challenged too and humbled through this experience, because I teach regularly at a pretty high volume. Um, I think at peak, I was teaching like 34 classes a week.
Wow.
And in the last year, I did narrow it down to about 20 to 25 classes a week. And doing that, jumping around between Zoom to wearing masks to being on concrete and being outdoors, again, like in heat waves and wildfire smoke and stuff, definitely took a physical toll on my body and challenged even my just simply my own energy that I could commit into enjoying my own breaking. And yeah, that was a bummer. It was challenging. And it definitely did expose some parts of myself that I needed to see, as far as like, you know, why am I really teaching breaking? What am I getting out of this? What am I really enjoying out of teaching breaking if the process of teaching breaking itself is not really as enjoyable as it was? And
Right.
if a large number, not all, but if a large number of students that I have are also not really enjoying it this way,
Mhm.
it yeah, it was just like a lot of self geared questions, in terms of like, is this really sustainable? Is this really something that I want to keep spinning as if it's
Right.
a wheel?
Yeah. If it's not working, like why continue trying to like ram your head into the wall? Right. At least
Exactly.
like with the same approach.
And I mean, like also having the perspective that like, you know, you can pivot and you can go totally online. I know that, especially as a b-boy and as an artist, like you can always evolve to suit the market. But it's like the simple thing is like, is it a matter of something that you want to do or not?
Hmm.
And I am so grateful to have been able to do this for such a long time, nearly 10 years, to teach breaking as a passion and as a career and as a human being. And I see how I can keep the wheel spinning. Like after all this time and experience, I know how I could continue to keep dancing and keep teaching dance and creating program as a career. But I'm also seeing it, or feeling like it is a little bit of a hamster wheel in some cases, that I think every artist is lucky to get to a point where they see their own success, and also where that can be stifling and almost like a form of a prison.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to like lock yourself in an echo chamber. You want to evolve.
Exactly. And I feel like I'm coming into that space right now as an artist and as a teacher. And I have a lot of like self-judgment as far as like, and negativity directed inwards as far as like being ungrateful for it, because I guess a part of me is like upset at myself for feeling this way. But at the same time, like I do recognize that I feel stifled, I feel blunted, I guess, as far as being, not just being a teacher, because I do see where some kids like this really is a light and a spark in their lives. But like looking at my own health physically and mentally and being like, well, if I can't be stoked and happy and feel physically good doing all of this, then something needs to change, or something will happen to make me change. And I could wait for that. Eddie Styles told me that I could wait for that moment, whether it's through injury or who knows what else, like being burned out and just being a douchebag.
Right.
or I can, humbly and graciously bow out and use this as a positive challenge. How do I impart wisdom or experience and even stories onto future teachers or a future teacher for this program, and impart this phase that I'm going through to my students who themselves will be, clearing high school soon and clearing middle school soon. And, one way or another, everybody does have to find their own reason and system to do their art. And I imagine, on a positive note, this is kind of like the final lesson to help share sustainability and autonomy for my students. And so, yeah, I've decided that I am going to move back to Hawaii in June, in the middle of this coming year. And I don't know what is up ahead. I don't really have a career planned. I know that I am going to be breaking for as long as I humanly can. I know that I will still be teaching in some part, shape, or form locally in Hawaii. Hijack is doing amazing things with his, not just students, but his community of families called Keiki Breaks. And it's always a joy to see my crew members and their people blossom, and I want to support and be there in whatever way I can. So I know that I'm going to be teaching in some small degree, but not at this scale. I think that I feel okay now. I feel actually a little relieved now, putting my intention into the universe, that I'm ready to pivot or transition into the unknown. And being 31 years old and listening to a lot of Gary Vee, realizing like 31 is still young, and in perspective, I did all of this stuff in about 9 years, nine years here in the Bay. And I imagine 9 years going forward, 31 to 40, 41, 42, still be good. I'll still be healthy. I mean, and I know Profo is an uncle and a mentor to me. He's 44, still dancing, definitely.
Crazy, man. Yeah.
And not just dancing, but developing
and thriving,
and progressing. And it's nine years doing something else and being able to reframe my own art, and even teaching sounds really exciting and awesome and liberating. And I guess I'll tell you too firsthand that everything that I've done so far in the last 9 years, maybe it's the nerd in me, I've recorded, not just on Instagram as far as making video highlights of our jams and our programming and trips, but lesson plans, just even invoicing formats.
You recorded that?
I've recorded all of it, and I want to format it and give it out for free, because I know exactly what it feels like to be kind of thrown into an industry and love it and be willing to be humbled by it, but still having no idea what to do. And that's how I felt when I started teaching breaking full time. And I want to put something out for anybody who's willing to digest it or even hear it out. I want to put something out for free for those people. I can't even say that it's a pedagogy. Maybe it's just a huge collection of Google Drive notes and lesson plans. But I want to produce that like the OPP event planning system that I put out for free. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
I want to produce those tools and make them available for people who are just passionate and want to get into teaching breaking and creating a community, but have nowhere to start. I want to at least put something in the pot as far as agree or disagree with it, like here's something that you could like chew on.
I love
And
that.
yeah, that I think that's going to be a final kind of like, maybe it's not really final, but that's going to be a part of my departure.
The end of this chapter, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just putting all of it out there and seeing whoever takes it, what they do with it.
I love
Yeah.
that, man. I do want to mention because actually that left I completely forgot, but that OPP, the optimized prelim procedure, is that what it stands for? Yeah, that it's just like I mean, right now bare bones, it's a system you created in Sheets, but
Yeah.
that actually helped a ton in
Yeah.
like organizing our jam. Like it was huge. So I want to thank you for letting us use that and just
Yeah.
whatever resources you have that you want to continue to build on, whether it's giving out for free now or continuing to develop it into something else.
Yeah.
Just know that, yeah, we co-signed that, bro. Crossroadz co-signs that. So we'd love to talk to you more about developing that and helping you on your journey for that for sure.
Yeah.
So
I was told that Google has like a new, like an online free Google app like function where you can translate uh, sheets and information from like forms into like more of a apt
whoa.
thing.
Okay. Yeah. We'll speak more on that. I'm definitely down to check that out. But you said putting into the pot. So speaking of pots, there's something happening soon that I wanted to at least talk to you a little bit about as we close up. I mentioned that earlier, but there's something that you guys threw because due to the pandemic, we can't get together, and every year you guys have been we have events all over the world, including one that is super great and I see as a lot of fun that 808 Breakers likes to throw in Hawaii. So I want you to tell us what you're doing instead, which sounds really exciting, how you guys came up with that idea, and any other stories you'd like to tell behind the creation of what the Melting Pots is doing this year.
Whew, okay. Wow, that's a lot. So yeah, the melting pot this year is a video kind of like short movie, short film fest concept, and a lot of us are kind of like putting our heads together just to finance it and make it happen out of love and to fill part of the empty space of what has ensued from the pandemic, as far as oh my god, what am I saying? Since the pandemic,
We're closing up. Yeah.
we've seen a ton of online battles, right? Online live stream or not, battles that kind of are around the same shape and form of trying to do what has been done just online. And a lot of gripes that not just us, but even some of our students have is that like you simply can't translate a lot of the energy and just experience of battling and like staring at somebody in a video camera into a digital format. And we were, I guess the concept of all of this erupted from seeing the empty space created by so many online digital contests, basically, and thinking like, well, if we're online, if we are editing videos, if we are doing retakes, if there is lag and latency problems and all this stuff, like how are we actually using all of this technology to our advantage, and why are there no competitions that are embracing that? Because online battles are not, maybe to some degree they're going to exist forever, but they're not going to become the new standard of battles. Like everybody knows that like the new standard of battles is not like battling your webcam.
Yeah, it's never going to replace it.
It's
It's
a
just
temporary thing, and maybe as a side, I guess, as a complement to competition structure, perhaps. Perhaps. But it's like, I guess in the last 7 months, we just haven't seen anybody engage people creatively and collaboratively, as far as like knowing filmmakers, knowing music producers, knowing people that have like a good visual aesthetic like feeling, applying that to making your breaking look dynamic, and not out of this like machismo thing of like, oh well, it's not raw unless you can hear my feet scraping the ground, and like hear me grunting and like farting in my room, like, just being like, well, if we're recording this and editing it and like you're putting on makeup essentially, then like why don't we just go full in on that? Why don't we create create a challenge for our community to show breaking the way that we imagine it and that we feel it. um and Yeah, I guess this is brand new news for the Crossroadz, but we're trying to get it endorsed by Pro Breaking Tour and UDEF. So actually, we actually already have more money involved, but it is a short 3-minute film fest concept where you get to show your breaking creatively in the way that you imagine it. And yeah, the idea, it kind of came out of that empty space of what doesn't exist. I held back from it for a long time. Mostly because I was trying to deal with teaching and how to pivot as a teacher. Uh, there was something else I wanted to say about it. Now I'm like starting to blank.
That's all right. I wanted to just say that I think it's super great how you guys are taking advantage of the situation, as opposed to, like you said, nothing wrong with trying to adapt real life situations into virtual. I think that is the move, right? Like you have to start from somewhere. But now it's like kind of embracing what virtual can do that real life can't. And I think with this, you are really taking advantage of the 2D, or not 2D, but the filmmaking, aka like digital or medium platform. So I'm really looking at,
the thing that galvanized all of this and like brought it to life as more of than just an idea was the Olympics. Right. So, the Olympics is a really hot topic in our dance scene. There's a lot of concern. There's a lot of optimism. There's this and that. But for the people that are so concerned, I figure that this kind of project or challenge is an opportunity for you to put your skills where your mouth is, and if it's like, okay, like people are so concerned that the Olympics or this platform or this type of contest is going to take away from the way that I see the way that I perceive my own dance and my crew. It's like, well, I mean, whether there's a contest or not, you should show that anyway. But especially now, it's like, well, you can get paid to do that. Like, what are all the things that you think the Olympics are going to miss? Like, for example, people feel like the Olympics are not going to be as gritty, and it probably won't as a jam, or it won't portray breaking in a gritty sense. It won't portray it in a communal kind of like vibration. And it definitely won't have any kind of like crew essence. Maybe it will, I guess, between like countries representing together, but not in the way that like a lot of B-girls and B-boys understand it. And it's like, why, rather than complaining about what won't be shown, we can as a community put work into just showing that thing. And yeah, again, ideally it shouldn't be for a reward, but hopefully this motivates people, at least in the USA, to show those beautiful moments that we all kind of experience in the periphery of being at jams or being B-boys or B-girls in general. Those moments in the periphery of like talking with your friend, like goofing around at a practice, or randomly breaking at like a 7-Eleven or like a Target, like a song comes on, or like a live, like somebody's playing music in the streets and you're just going off. Like show that. We should be showing that, especially if the concern is that it's that kind of image of what breaking is going to be swept under the rug.
That spontaneity, I think there's a real chance to capture a bigger picture than just what goes on within the jam, right? And I think the possibilities are endless with this. So it's super exciting. And the idea, like when people watch battles, like that's pretty much you get what you see, right? Because it's a production, right? And like for the most part, if you don't understand like who the character is or whatever, that's pretty much you get what you see. But with this challenge, like you're opening the door for breakers to show people, anybody, whether it be another breaker or their friends or family, like what they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm super stoked about this project, man. And I really, really want to thank you guys for doing this,
Of
first of
course.
all. And I'm excited. Best believe that Uncomfortably Fresh is entering and that we're
Yay.
formulating. So yeah, you've got another competitor. And is the deadline still January 25th? Okay.
Yes. I mean, I think even if we do get the whole thing endorsed by UDEF, it's still, the idea is to try to get this thing out before February, and
Gotcha.
be able to present all of the pieces like a collage, or like clip them together and make almost like a movie from like around the world, cruise around the world. And so
Yeah.
like to me at least, like any jam and battle, everyone is a winner when the competition level is high, and when there just are people there and people engaged, like simply that. And that, like, if we have a lot of people in it, in this spectrum, like we should have like a really nice mosaic and visual of like what crews look like. And like, even following yourself, Kai, and like seeing all of your projects and your endeavors, and like learning the art of like filmmaking on both like a technical end as well as almost on in a philosophical end too. Like realizing that any piece of art that you put out like this is a timestamp. It's
Hmm.
it's like a entry in a journal of your life and your journey and your crew and your family and your communities. And those things, again, like you can't really put a dollar value onto those things, those scrapbook kind of like moments that you imagine yourself maybe in your deathbed when you're an old person, that you'll be able to look at and smile at,
Hmm.
and so I think more so than just having jams where people fly around and do intense things, I think like being able to curate a visual aesthetic of how you see your own dance form and your family around it is something that we hope like people will just at the very least like hold on to for their whole lives, regardless of the outcome, because that's certainly how we've done it ourselves. Nearly every jam that we've gone to as a crew, like I think we've created like some kind of material or like highlight, whether it gets shown to the public or not.
And you
uh,
always have that to look back at, and I
yeah,
think you always thank yourself for making it. So yeah,
yeah,
I think this is the opportunity you're providing people with this. So
yeah.
yeah, man, I really want to just say thanks again. So we have a few user questions. I'll let Ark read the questions, and then we'll try to condense them into a single question. So Ark, who did you get some questions from? And
So I got a couple of questions from dancers in the community. How did you plan the curriculum, and what is the process of creating a teaching schedule for your kids? Which I think it's a great question, especially for anybody like getting into teaching breaking. I think for me, having the experience of taking martial arts classes like capoeira and taking like formal arts instruction as far as being in orchestra gave me a really strong template of how to create not just curriculum but like a progression plan and leveling, I guess, of classes. And uh, I guess doing my own work on my own foundation as far as not just movement, but the understanding of the philosophy and historical context of that movement in breaking. Developing myself and seeing my own progress and then applying it to the format of an orchestra or martial arts class has kind of helped me produce curriculum that and progressions for kids in our program that are aged from elementary school to high school across 6 different levels of classes. I
Mhm.
mean, I could get into the specifics of like, you should probably learn how to do coffee grinders and sweeps and Russian kicks and CCs before you're doing full-fledged patterns like 6 steps and 7 steps even, or 3 steps. But essentially writing out everything that you know and trying to formulate names of those things helps you connect the dots in a pretty logical way. And then, like anything else, trial and error and test running those progressions and teaching them in a class helps you to firm out what is a logical jump of movement from, like, can we teach baby freezes before windmills or after windmills? Like, there's a lot of trial and error in that process. And I think depending on the environment that you're teaching and the demographic of people that you're teaching, those things are different. For me, teaching in a dance studio where the dance is looked at a little more formally, and not just breaking, but any dance, you can kind of expect kids to practice a little more, and for this dance to be met with a little bit more seriousness, versus, and I have experience doing this, teaching in an after school program that's a lot more recreational, or even like within a school PE program, which I've also done too, where the emphasis is more to just to break a sweat. So like knowing your context, writing out everything you know how to do and how you learned it are kind of the components, I think, for anybody to create their own individualized curriculum and progression planning for kids or adults in any kind of teaching setting.
Got you. How do you feel about having some sort of outcome or like an end goal in mind for each level? Do you do that as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I used to have a lot more serious and firm end goals or outcomes per class or group of students when I first started teaching. And as I continued to teach, I found that I enjoyed the teaching itself a lot more when I allowed myself to arbitrarily set random and really high overarching goals for kids. So specifically, I started off with being like, okay, in a beginner class, kids should understand the difference between top rock, down rock, power moves, and freezes. And they should be able to perform basic level movements in each of those zones, to give them a wide offering in place. They should understand how to organize a concept of freestyling and how to, on a base level, apply meaning to their movements. So like, I think that's base artistry, honestly, is that like, I'm not just kicking my legs. Like, kicking my legs means something. I'm making a shape, whether it's a shape or whether it's like musically influenced. So for example, like in a beginner class, I had these like very firm logical outcomes. And after some time of teaching like that, the teaching itself wasn't exciting for me. And therefore, my presence in the class was not as dynamic. And so I realized, like, even then, through time, your curriculums have to shift and evolve. And I remember like one semester, I was like, you know what, for my beginning classes, we're going to learn how to cross step and like do coffee grinders and baby freeze. But beyond that, we're just going to do windmills. We're just only going to do windmills. I feel like we're just going to see how quickly people can learn windmills.
Oh my gosh.
Like, it's like treating even your own seriousness of outcomes and goals as pliable and light, like not serious, I guess, because again, this is an art form, it's a dance, there's so many different angles to it and different ways that people can enjoy it. Like, trying to reprogram that constantly, I think, helps you become a versatile teacher. And even if not that, it allows the teaching experience to be enjoyable and dynamic and, of course, sometimes chaotic, but fun for the practitioner, the teacher themselves. Sorry, I kind of ran away from the question on that one.
No, that was all in line, I think, with the question. I think that's going to be super.
We do outcomes that evolve, evolving, shifting outcomes.
That's great. Yeah. But it's always important to, I guess, have something in mind, right?
Yes.
Okay.
To work backwards,
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, okay.
If you have outcomes for your syllabus or whatever at the end of the semester, then planning individual weeks and months and days become pretty easy.
Got you. All right. Thank you, man. That was a good answer. Let's see. I have one from Ivan Yen, and this question is: what are some major differences between the way kids learn to dance versus the way adults learn to dance? Do you have experience? I'm sure you have experience teaching adults, but what's your opinion on that?
The biggest difference in one word is, or I guess two words, is self-belief.
Mm,
I think with adults, naturally, there is a lot more ego, and I don't mean arrogance, but I mean there's a lot more ego and identity in what you think you can and can't do. And breaking as a dance fundamentally challenges those things. As a kid, and again, like when we say kid, there's a huge difference between teaching a 7-year-old, teaching a 12-year-old, teaching a 16-year-old. I guess we all call them kids, but
right. It's there's a lot of
yeah, there's a lot of human
differentiations.
developmental differences there. But I
Yeah.
would say, like, if we were to throw them all in the same bucket of calling them kids, in general, younger people have less of a preconceived notion of their limits and capabilities. They're a little more pliable. Um, and yeah, I think that it's enjoyable to teach kids and adults alike for different reasons, but primarily because of that whole belief paradox that, with kids, almost like gardening, you don't really know exactly what you're going to get. You kind of just have to push energy into them and push uh, self-confidence into these guys so that their beliefs kind of mold into like an upper oriented place, and
Hmm.
that they can develop things and surprise themselves. And I think with adults, teaching them, you have to usually work within their beliefs of themselves and sneak surprises in there, and like give them more visible progressions in terms of like, you will learn this so that you can learn this, and you have to be able to see that relationship between these movements or these understandings, that, like, for example, like, you should learn these basic movements and how to transition between these things, because in our concept of freestyling, that's in freedom, that's what it is. It's your ability to freely decide and choose between these movements. Like, that has to be an understanding
Right.
for an adult, so that they know the direction of learning these individual transitions and moves. Whereas, like, as a kid, I feel like you don't necessarily have to unspool that as much. um, I think on a physical level, when you work with adults, you also have to work within physical limits a lot more, and injuries.
Right.
The human body grows and kind of crystallizes itself after your adolescence a lot harder than, between the ages of like 5 and 18, or 5 and
Mm.
20. um, so even like how you set up training regimens is going to be like hugely different. Yeah.
Right. It seems like when you're teaching people who are past adolescence, there's a lot more logic that you have to make sure that you are embedding into them, because that's, I mean, at that point, also level of, like, all of this stuff, it makes more sense. And it's probably, if I'm not wrong, is it more like in tactile and intuitive, and maybe just kind of doing it for kids?
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. A lot of it, I think, also is like attention driven too, right?
Mm,
Like, for adults, or yeah, for older people doing this dance, like, you find people generally at least can understand the idea that you have to sit on like one thing to really get it down. Whereas with younger kids, you I mean, it still applies, like, repetition is key, but I've found that framing and reframing a movement or an exercise in different ways is how you can get a kid with a low attention span to essentially be doing the same thing over and over, but not really know that they're doing the same thing over and over. Whether it's like, okay, here's a move, okay, you have to dance using it. Oh, now you have to use this move to travel you across the floor. You have to do a relay race using CCs, or like
Wow.
now we have to play tag on the ground and like tag each other's shoes doing the CC movement. So they're working a move, but like
Yeah.
it feels the context changes and stuff. So like it's a little digestible there.
That's really clever. I like that a
It's
lot.
it's fun to work with adults because like you also get to see people reveal themselves. Again, going back into like ego and identity, you see people open up as adults a little bit more, and you can have kind of like deeper conversations about the essence of movement and what it means to people that you won't really get with kids, because it's, you know, like this dance in general is just kind of also a primal thing too that you just feel. That's the other side of this, and that kids feel it a lot more there, and you might not be able to have those like deep conversations, but yeah.
That's great. Okay. That was yeah, that was a great answer to that question. Thanks, Ark.
Oh, Allison has a question.
She does. Okay, so before we close off, Allison, you can ask your question, and yeah, I'll edit it in.
All right. So I wanted to, like, you kind of answered it like halfway, like with your final words, but I wanted to ask, like, specifically, how do you personally navigate difficult emotions like ego, like when ego gets in the way, entitlement, frustration? Because obviously, like this breaking journey, like really challenges you to like face yourself. And
Yeah.
it's not easy. So I'd like to know your insight
Yeah.
on that.
I For myself, what's been a tremendous tool in finding peace day to day, year to year, month to month, and navigating a career and just even the breaking scene has been journaling and finding people on your same wavelength that you can open up to and just ask questions out loud to yourself and to others. You know, like, why was that guy so mean? Like, for example, like things like that, or like what, like asking, being able to ask the questions that out loud, being able to ask questions out loud to yourself and other people around you, to like the things that are really chipping away at you, ironically is the like solution, or has been the solution for me as far as like finding clarity and finding peace uh, through difficult times and navigating like identity and ego and things like that. Like literally just posing the question. Um, I've been really thinking about this like statement that I heard somewhere in some podcast. I'm paraphrasing it, but I've been thinking about this saying that like ultimately all questions in life boil down to the same question. And the question is, what are you unwilling to let yourself feel? Like that is the core of resistance in life.
Hmm.
What is it that you are unwilling to allow yourself to feel? And I think just shining light, which is self-awareness, on your pain and trauma, or even like things that anxiety of things that like you're looking towards in the future of your life, often provides peace and clarity, and it allows those things to kind of just sit in front of you and dissolve, like dissipate. Just like attention, really, like peaceful attention. I know this is all like really broad, but those are like just strategies that I've found really helpful on my journey, because there's just been so much uncertainty in creating a career out of teaching breaking, for example, and how that's perceived by my family or by my friends or by my peers, or even the community that I serve, you know? So.
Been way over your time. I just want to thank you so much, man, for all the things you've shared with us today, from your journey to the happy accidents and the happy lessons you've learned, to your technical sides, to crew and to philosophy. All of it, I think people will be able to take a ton from. And yeah, I'll definitely be listening back to this a lot. And yeah,
Thank
I mean, I don't have any other questions for you. Besides, if there are any last words you'd like to leave our audience with, not yeah, you can feel free to do that right now. And if not, then it's completely fine as well.
He can talk more. um, hmm. I think I'd just like to end by saying that it's important to trust the serendipity of life and trust the direction of your curiosity, even in the face of tremendous uncertainty. That if you have a strong work ethic and positive health practices, both mental and physical, that you can get through nearly every challenge that's set in front of you. And it's an even bigger bonus when you have a team, a crew, a family, people that support you. And that when it comes to career trailblazing and even staying on the same path as people who have done things that you want to do ahead of you, it's all definitely possible, and that it's a matter of like reaching out to people for help a lot of the time that can like give you your north star that you need, and that those things are valuable and communication is valuable. And yeah, it's doable. Like life surprises you, I guess. I think that's, if anything, that's what my life has taught me, is that surprises surprises, if anything, are the thing to bet on. Bet on serendipity, bet on surprises, bet on pleasantries and blessings, that they do come true.
All right. Thank you very much,
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. Yes.
For really putting your heart on your sleeve, whether it be on the floor or just face to face. I think that's something that we'll take with us for a very long time. And yeah, I appreciate you for your time, brother. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, I wish we could talk longer, but I don't want to take too much of your time. It's been good, and yeah, I appreciate you. Make sure you follow Ark on Ark808 on Instagram. Check him out on LinkedIn. Check him out wherever social media platforms are.
How many of these b-boys got LinkedIn?
Yeah, I know, right? You got a good LinkedIn, so I would definitely take a look at it for inspiration. And yeah, without further ado, thank you again. And this is Kai, Ark on the Crossroads, signing out. Until next time.
Appreciate you guys.
Hey guys, it's Kai again. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Crossroads Show. If you're really enjoying the content, I would highly implore you on checking out our Crossroads Discord server. It's a beautiful space where we curate content between Nico and I, our previous guests, and our Crossroads listeners. We engage in conversations, people can suggest what they want to see in future episodes and future events. We would love to have you. If you're interested, go ahead and click the link in our Instagram at @thecrossroadz_, or message one of us at the Crossroads, or message myself at KaiVertigoH. Can't wait to hear from you. Until next time, guys, take care and have a good one. Peace.